Hey guys, Saturday, it's time for yet another episode of The Breakfast Club. So, individualism, celebration of individuality. It's something that tends to be praised and uplifted here in the West, especially in the United States. The celebration of the self, of one's individual talents, personalities, the things that make them themselves, what makes you you. They're highly celebrated here in the West, usually for good reasons. I mean, people really don't like being like everyone else, and people don't want to be considered, like drones, like robots, just melting into the crowd. People want to stand out, and people want their individual talents to shine. They want their unique voice to come out, to find a way to, just stand out amongst all the other voices out there. Have their moment to shine. However, I feel that there's a bit of an overemphasis on individualism, and that sometimes tends to be exploited. Individualism, for instance, tends to appeal to our more selfish natures. If you're trying to make yourself stand out, sooner or later it's going to be yourself above everyone else, your needs above everyone else. Like, well, my talent needs to shine and this person needs to be put in the back. There also happens to be the aspect of taking advantage of one's desire to stand out, in the form of commercialism. Selling things to them to make them think that they can stand out more than others, whether it be through clothing, through, cars, this car is going to make you stand out. Buying this house, as a status symbol will make you stand out, and so on and so forth. And there's a very huge marketing push here in the United States to take advantage of these things, and it works pretty well. Marketing in particular is focused a lot on appealing to one's sense of standing out from the crowd, of expressing their individuality through the items that they buy, or through even through the foods that they get. Like, you could already, it's pretty easy to explain, how clothing or jewelry or cars or houses or whatever it is that they buy makes them try to stand out. Look what I got, compared to what you got. But even something simple as food and drink also takes advantage of this, where depending on what brands of food you buy or what you're seen walking around with, what type of coffee cups in your hand, that's also a status symbol. And so much of this is a rejection of collectivism, of coming together as a group of people to make things work. And yet the funny thing is, that's how humans survive. That's how we've survived up until this point, by coming together despite our differences. There's a huge emphasis on, our differences. In a positive light, of course, your differences make you unique and it makes you special and so on. But there's also the emphasis on, your differences, separate you from other people. Oh, they're too different to be able to relate to you, or they're too different to be able to fit in. And thus we get our many different squabbles and different fights and conflicts that plague us to this day. But the human species was able to survive through adapting to their environment, and also by coming together. I mean, this has been stated before by many different people, including myself, but the human animal doesn't have many of the strengths that other animals have. We're not especially durable. We don't have sharp claws, fangs, teeth, the super strength, all that type of things that you happen to see other animals have, we don't have. Now, people say that, how we were able to survive through our big brains. And yeah, that's one aspect, but the other aspect is us simply banding together, forming societies. That's how we're able to make it. Adaptation also is a huge part of how we're able to survive. If you're able to adapt to your environment, you can survive it, no matter what happens to be in that environment, unless that environment is just so detrimental to life, and in that case, you just leave it. But it's us coming together and forming societies that help us to, continue along. When huge crises happen, it's usually that's what kind of shocks us out of our, I'm just going to say it right now, our illusion of individuality, of how unique we are compared to everyone else. And we come together to help one another out, usually without much prompting. And we're able to see these disasters through. Because deep down, that is how we survive. That's why we form societies in the first place, to ensure our survival. And yet this overemphasis, this push on our individual natures, I honestly think is threatening to tear the fabrics of our society apart. And it's happening in different ways, not just through marketing and exploiting our nature to want to stand out, but it's also in some of the very basic tools that we use, technological tools. Some of you guys may have noticed some of the backlash against social media. Some people pointing out that the way it was designed, things like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, so on and so forth, the way these things were designed to kind of, hit, the dopamine aspects of our brain, just giving us a dopamine hit every time we do something to get a like on there, or, we constantly keep posting things up, or we're constantly looking to see if anyone responded to whatever we put on there, and that these things are, hitting the dopamine centers of our brain, and they knew that would cause us to get hooked to these things. And the very nature of social media and how it works is working against the very fabric of society. Like, it goes against the ways that we naturally come together and work things out, particularly in the way that we end up joining groups that, it's just like either like-minded people or people that like what we do, quote unquote. We gravitate towards, the groups that please us, that make us feel better as we join them. So it's, whether you're going to an echo chamber or whether you're just simply surrounding yourself by a bunch of, quote unquote, yes men, or people always just hitting likes and likes and likes of whatever the hell it is you put up. We are, there's less interaction with people where we have to compromise, where we have to have civil discourse. And if we have to engage any sort of difference in somebody else, it tends to be hostile. Even to the point where if we see somebody with that slight difference in opinion, or that slight difference in outlook or look or whatever, they're instantly rejected. I'm sure one can argue that social media isn't necessarily a pariah, that it's not, the cause of society breaking down entirely, but I can see the argument, and I think there is something to that. What I will say is that there are ways that social media is bringing people together in more positive ways, because deep down, no matter how individualistic we want to be or that we claim that we are, we still want to come together. And sometimes that means putting aside your ego in order to come together, especially when it comes time to solving problems that affect everyone. Putting aside that ego, that whole thing of, I'm important. Sometimes you aren't important. Sometimes it's all of you that's important, that needs to be addressed. I kind of look at it this way. The individual is important, yes, insofar as they're able to contribute to the society that they're a part of. The society is there to help nurture the individual. The individual is there to help continue the society. Otherwise, both perish. It's a give and take relationship. You can't overemphasize one over the other. At least that's my perspective on the whole thing. Though I will state that it's rather interesting how certain philosophies, and I'm not talking about like fairly recent ideologies, political ideologies, well, more like, older philosophies like Taoism, Buddhism, I guess you can argue those are religions, tend to talk about the sacrificing of the self, or rather that the self doesn't really exist, that it's an illusion, and that by playing into that illusion, one brings themselves more suffering. Whereas if they accept that they are a part of a larger whole, that the suffering will decrease, that they will have a more content life. There may be some truth to that. But we're not really going to find out if that is true or not unless we are willing to put aside our egos. That's a very difficult thing to do, isn't it? But in this day and age, where I really feel that people need to come together more than ever, it may be time to exercise that. Just a little. Anyway, just something to think about. See you guys later.